Thank you, everyone. That was an awesome panel, hot topic. We're stoked to have those guys really bring it home for us. We're going to look to the future here. We got another sweet panel, a lot of exciting developments happening in Bitcoin. We got Eric Yates from Epoch Ventures, John Gordon from Sound HSA, Jordan Guest from BitMint, and Malcolm Walton from Gannett Wealth Advisors. Gentlemen.
Awesome. Excited to be chatting about new products in the Bitcoin space coming onto the market. Big shout out again to Jordan and Wyatt for putting this on, and Eric in the space for hosting everything. I'm John Gordon, co-founder of Sound HSA. We had a fun hike this morning, had a good time out in the mountains, and appreciate you all being here. So would love for you guys to just give a brief background about yourself and how you ended up on the stage.
My name's Eric. I came from the private equity world, and I always loved economics, and I became obsessed with Bitcoin and jumped all into this industry 5 years ago. We have a venture capital firm that's investing in Bitcoin companies. And the reason for that is that I'm passionate about this because Bitcoin needs to become freedom money for the world. And that's a very, very hard problem to solve. There's a lot of infrastructure, there's software, there's companies, there's all these things that need to be built so that more people can access it, store it, send it, insure it, do all these different things with it. And that's kind of our mission, is to invest in those types of things that are going to expand Bitcoin adoption so that it can be the first neutral monetary system in the world.
There we go. Hey, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Malcolm Walton. I'm a wealth advisor with Gannett Wealth Advisors, where we combine traditional financial planning with Bitcoin. Gannett Wealth Advisor was formerly the Sound Advisory, but we recently merged with Gannett Trust Company to really be able to provide a holistic planning standpoint for clients and incorporate trust and estate planning services as well. I joined what was then Sound Advisory in January of this year. Prior to that, I was in the traditional financial planning world for around 7 years. Learned a lot, worked with a lot of great people, but my conviction in Bitcoin just did not mesh well with my previous firm. So luckily, found Sound Advisory, now Gannett Wealth Advisors, where we're able to help clients with financial planning with a focus on Bitcoin.
Hey, I'm Jordan Guest. I run a tax and accounting firm out of Louisville, Kentucky called Trusted Advisor CPA. And then about a year ago, I'd been trying to convince a software developer in Louisville that I've known for a while to build a Bitcoin bank statement product to go in on that with me. And so we launched that and traveled a lot this year to different conferences. And the tool has taken a few different iterations, and now it's a full-blown accounting software, and it tracks your cost basis and your tax reporting.
Awesome. And for those of you who are newer to the Bitcoin space, it may feel like a lot. There's so many companies, great services, products that are already established in the market and coming out of the market. So I think coming to these types of events are super important to learn, interact, and get a sense of how each company or service can help you grow in your own Bitcoin journey. My background's in the healthcare industry and saw very much how the healthcare industry is broken, and ultimately found that it's because the money's broken. And we need to integrate Bitcoin into healthcare. And I started orienting myself towards that over the last few years. And one of the huge helps for me personally was reading Eric's book, Seventh Property. So if you guys haven't yet, definitely recommend picking that up and reading that amazing history of finance and getting into Bitcoin. And I'm curious, Eric, for you in writing the Seventh Property and distilling a lot of your thoughts from the financial industry, how do you take that approach to, and that kind of proof of work from the book, into your landscape as you evaluate companies from the Epoch perspective and venture capital and evaluating new companies coming onto the space?
So it's tricky, right? Like, we just had this panel talking about the Bitcoin hurdle rate. And it's like, well, why don't we just buy Bitcoin? And that can become an answer for a lot of different things. I think it depends at one end of the spectrum. You know, there's a lot of people who have a significant exposure to Bitcoin in this room and all over the world at this point. And the reality is that, I mean, who here has seen like the market sizes for how big Bitcoin could be, right? Like, we've seen these charts that go around, and like, I mean, the reality is these market sizes are all just they're dynamic. Like these numbers change over time. It's kind of just like, finger in the air type things that we're looking at. And the point is it could be big. The difference between Bitcoin just being a store of value versus being a medium exchange and money for the world in terms of how valuable one unit of Bitcoin becomes is massive. It's incomprehensibly large. It's infinitely larger, basically. And that difference is really important. So I think when people have exposure to Bitcoin and you think about, well, what needs to be built so that Bitcoin can be more than just a store of value for people, it can be more than a digital gold, that increases the potential value of your Bitcoin very, very significantly. So that's how we think about it in a lot of ways, is we're just trying to expand Bitcoin adoption, and we're trying to do that on the right time horizon. And that's a really hard problem to solve. And I think that that's kind of like our duty in the industry as venture capitalists is, one, we're finding capital. We're out talking with family offices and high net worth individuals, and we're making this case for why they should be interested in Bitcoin. They should be interested in investing in the infrastructure around it. And that, we're fighting in the trenches on that angle. I'm having these conversations all the time. And then at the other angle, we're capital allocators within the industry. So we're determining what is a good time for something to exist. And maybe there's a good idea that exists, but it's not the best time for it. If you look at what creates successful companies, market timing is the number one determining factor. It has to be the right time for the existence of it. And that's really what we try to spend a lot of time thinking about, is what's very relevant for us to be investing in today, and what does Bitcoin need now? And those often aren't the answers that people want. That's often, you have to be pressed with reality, because we need to provide a return to our limited partners, like full stop. Otherwise we cease to exist. So we really have to focus on reality. And the reality is that adoption is coming through institutional infrastructure in a very significant way today. And a lot of these longer term visions of medium exchange, freedom tech, a lot of that has a much longer time horizon until it's relevant. Bitcoin needs to be this massive store of value before we really start using it as money later on. So we're very hyper focused on what's the best way that we can have Bitcoin penetrate the store of value market as largely as it could, and what needs to be built to make that happen. But I'll shut up now.
No, it's super helpful to hear your perspective and what you're looking out for, and really increasing Bitcoin adoption and starting with that store of value. And as we move into medium of exchange, and we've heard a lot about businesses incorporating Bitcoin into their balance sheet and accepting it for payments, such as via platforms like Zapright. Jordan, how have you thought about the problem, or what are you trying to tackle with BitMent right now? What are you trying to solve and build in your tax and service accounting business?
Yeah, I was just looking around for Jason Keel. Even a couple of the conversations earlier this morning, Jason called his accountant in what he said 21 and essentially fired his CPA. But the guy, and then Michael was saying, oh, I got to convince this guy to sell the Bitcoin when he was first getting into it. And the reason for that's really simple. On the CPA tax accounting side, it's a headache. It's just the tools are not built such that you can easily track all of the accounting stuff and then all of the tax records, cost basis. And especially, and us Bitcoiners, we love to try out the newest tool, right? So almost no one is all in on River, right? Or all in on Coinbase. They are potentially purchasing one place, moving it here, there, yonder, cold storage, hot wallet. And so each of those hops, potentially there's a cost basis reset or there's not. And so what I saw when I got into the industry and I started doing some work on the practitioner side with Bitcoin miners specifically, is we were using QuickBooks to track the accounting, but then we were also using either spreadsheets to track all the tax records, or we were using a Coinly or a Coin Tracker, which those are all they support every crypto under the sun. So generally, I think that maybe their software devs are maybe their focus is not on the product because they're chasing after too many coins that they have to manage the nodes for and all that kind of stuff. So what we thought was, why don't we consolidate the softwares into one place and make lives like, for Joey and others who do Bitcoin bookkeeping, make it easy for them. And when they do data entry and they're, pushing this over to the revenue side or for a contractor expense or whatever it might be, why don't we also just put a simple checkbox there where they can say, hey, this is a cost basis event or this is a taxable event. And when you hit add, similar to how you would do in QuickBooks, it goes over to the accounting side and hits the P&L or balance sheet. But then it also, if it needs to, it flows over to the tax records. And so, and the big point there, to Eric's point a little bit earlier, is if we want small businesses to actually adopt Bitcoin, if the accounting and tax is too burdensome, until the government changes the rules and treats it as a currency and we get rid of cap gains, I'm all for that. I don't know when that's going to happen. And so in the meantime, we have to have the tooling such that it's not a burden and people can accept Bitcoin in their businesses. And at the end of the year, it's normal. The accountant knows what to do with the data to file the taxes.
Yeah, I'm excited for your software to launch, and it'll be super helpful for us at Sound HSA. We've been paying contractors, employees in Bitcoin, taking in some Bitcoin in investment, running a Bitcoin business, paying out sats for steps, as you guys learn here, and participate in Move to Earn challenges. And so with all those Lightning payments going out, we're going to have to account for those. So thanks to Satoshi Pacquioli for helping us take care of that. But I'm sure the software you're developing will make that even easier for businesses to really look at accepting Bitcoin as the best money and as the most efficient way for getting Bitcoin on the balance sheet, which is accepting it as payment. And I've been working the last couple years. I have a consulting business, Satoshi Health Advisors, where I've been focused on helping doctors and dentists and small businesses integrate a Bitcoin strategy. And having those conversations, definitely see how the tax burden or considering capital gains might be a hang up for some, but ultimately it's Bitcoiners in these businesses making a decision, say, I want to be a Bitcoin business. And we heard from Ben Justman last night and focusing all of his business on Bitcoiners as a market to ultimately grow your business, which is the goal of any business owner. So I'm curious, Malcolm, in your approach on more of the service side, consulting, how do you guys at Gannett look at supporting individuals in their Bitcoin journey and becoming a part of the ecosystem?
Absolutely. So always like to just start off with where the client's currently at. So one of the things we do early on for all clients, from an estate planning perspective, just making sure their Bitcoin is properly tied under the trust, making sure it's incorporated into their overall estate plan. From a cash flow planning standpoint, always like to make sure clients have at least somewhere around 3 to 6 months worth of cash for emergency that may come up, just so they're not a forced seller of Bitcoin at an inopportune time or in a down market. And also incorporate more familiar TradFi planning concepts with Bitcoin. So, for instance, one vehicle we use pretty often with clients is a donor advised fund. And I'm sure everyone in this room is familiar with the donor advised fund, but it's a tax efficient charitable giving vehicle that lets you get a contribution in the year you make a deduction, or you get a deduction in the year you make a contribution to the DAF. And then you can give grants to charities over time from the donor advised fund. So now you can actually do that with real Bitcoin. So through Unchained, there's a Bitcoin DAF. A lot of our clients have really low cost basis for their Bitcoin holdings. So that's the perfect Bitcoin to contribute to a donor advised fund. You get the tax deduction the year you make the contribution, and you avoid capital gains tax by doing that. So it's really helpful for a lot of our clients, especially if they're in a year where maybe it's a higher than normal income year. And as you can imagine, a lot of our clients are usually pretty charitably inclined. I think it's the whole, fix the money, fix the world ethos that a lot of Bitcoiners have. So really just trying to incorporate familiar TradFi concepts with Bitcoin.
The space is currently working on its federal tax exemption right now. So keep that in mind for the clients. And anybody else interested in supporting us, come talk to me.
That's great. And yeah, there's a lot of different tax vehicles out there. One of them for us at Sound HSA, trying to take advantage of this triple tax advantage that health savings accounts have in this country. And it's an existing market with 40 million accounts and $160 billion in value sitting in health savings accounts. So we're trying to get some of that value pushed over to Bitcoin, because half of the 160 billion sitting in cash and just wasting away and not even invested. So that's, as we've been looking at ideas and opportunities in the healthcare space and what we're trying to tackle, Eric, and open us this up to the panel too. What other opportunities we hear? Bitcoin can seep into a lot of different industries. Where do you see some other opportunities, and where do you think those products will emerge in the coming years?
Yeah, being a venture capitalist in this industry, we have a very bird's eye view of a lot of the things that exist around Bitcoin and where those exist in different parts of the world and what problems they're solving. And I think when I talk with a lot of people in Bitcoin, it's natural, right? Everybody thinks about things from their own specific situation, how they use Bitcoin, what they want from Bitcoin within the country that they're in and the regulations that they're subject to. And the reality is that there's a very wide, there's a lot of differences in that around the world, and there's a lot of different use cases for it today. People in developed markets using it as really more of an investment versus people who are actually using it as a form of freedom money in other parts of the world that don't have the same opportunities. Very wide distinctions in that. I think with one of the most interesting problems, and I'll try to keep this brief, but it's really, everybody's talking about stable coins right now in the broader financial media and the problems that those will solve around the world. And it's really important, but I think the major issue that's not really being discounted in the way businesses and banks and other financial institutions are thinking about it is there's a last mile problem that exists in the majority of the world for stablecoins. And until you can take Tether and you can go buy anything you want with it, and all the infrastructure is built out and all these different markets for that, until we get to that point, it's really just going to be used more like a banking money moving technology. And it's going to be better, but actually Bitcoin has a lot more advantages than stablecoins for that. When it comes to the price volatility, one, we put out a report. You make more money over the long term if you use Bitcoin and working capital than a stablecoin, because Bitcoin goes up in price. And if you're holding it for longer periods and short periods, you really shouldn't be too concerned about that volatility. Two, a lot of regulatory regimes, they look at it as a commodity. So when you're doing cross-border FX, that actually has very strong advantages for how Bitcoin would be viewed when you're transferring assets. And I think the way that we're seeing that, we're kind of okay, so in a lot of these countries with this last mile problem, who has novel solutions to really support addressing the idea that people want to use cash in the majority of the world, and getting a digital asset into the hands of people working in cash is really hard. It's we have a portfolio company that's building a franchise network of ATMs in these countries. If you see how remittance payments work in other countries right now, it's guys on WhatsApp who make a lot of domestic currency, and they're market makers down there. And, this company is working with those guys and saying, be a franchise owner of an ATM. You don't have to run around with a bunch of cash, and you can actually scale your business around this. And, there's really novel ways to look at, solving these types of issues. So that's something that we're really interested in. We look a lot at bank technology, too, and where that's going to be coming from today, because we want to get Bitcoin inside the banks, and they're going to realize that they're missing the forest through the trees when they focus on stablecoins, when they could be building out a loan portfolio on a very safe asset where you control the collateral and get 12% interest on it today. And whatever bank does that right now is going to be dominating the market in a few years.
Having done one of those currency exchanges in Buenos Aires 2.5 years ago, trading some dollars for a lot of pesos, it's definitely not a fully efficient market, and so many opportunities to get Bitcoin and Lightning into the hands of individuals worldwide, and that being an interesting market to tackle. I'm curious for Jordan and Malcolm, what do you guys see as some of the biggest challenges that either you faced or startup founders, builders in the space are facing right now in terms of getting these products off the ground? Is it more on finding kind of the product market fit, customers, more in compliance, regulatory? What do you see as some of your biggest challenges?
Yeah, so I would say when it comes from a client standpoint, just making sure they understand the importance of security, holding the Bitcoin themselves. There was a time where you couldn't hold the keys for your Bitcoin IRA, for example, right? So a lot of Bitcoiners kind of shunned or just completely avoided IRAs. Well, now you do have the option to do collaborative custody with IRAs. So looking forward to seeing that continue to develop in the space, whether it's through things like HSAs or, hopefully one day down the road, whether it's a 529 plan that you can hold real Bitcoin. as well as insurance products that are starting to be denominated in Bitcoin. So a lot of different exciting opportunities, I think, over the next several years.
Yeah, as you all were both talking, I was just thinking, one of the big issues I think right now, especially in our industry, is there's still a lot of people on the developer side of things, as well as on the financial professional side, they're too distracted with all the cryptocurrencies under the sun. And I think that was one of the reasons why I wanted to do this event and make it obviously Bitcoin only, is to just encourage focus. And I think that is a great moat for all of the small businesses out there that are looking to adopt Bitcoin, is to not get distracted by every currency under the sun, cryptocurrency under the sun. And I think even when we were starting with Bitmint, we've gotten a ton of questions. Oh, do you support? And I'm not even going to mention them, but the ones that I'm talking about. And we're like, no, we're just focused on Bitcoin. And if you have, other coins in your past, or you still do that kind of stuff, hopefully there's other tools, but we're staying focused just on Bitcoin only and Lightning. So I think that's a great, of course, everyone up on the stage is Bitcoin only with their business. And the hats off to Eric, by the way, because most VCs, the big VCs, right, they want to go after the biggest market, right? So, and that is the whole crypto market. And so,
and they're wrong, and
Yeah.
we're, and that's our whole bet, is that they're wrong. Yeah. And we're going to make a lot more money than they will in the next 5 years.
Let's go. Yeah, and there's really amazing emerging freedom technologies, right? And you mentioned using the Lightning Network as a layer 2 way to scale Bitcoin. There's been awesome developments with eCash and Fedimint's other protocols. We're using Nostr with our Sound HSA app so that anybody around the world can create an account and we can pay you in sats. We don't really need to know who you are. Eventually for the HSA, we will, as it's a U.S. tax regulated product. But in terms of widening the tent, enabling products globally where people can earn sats, control their identity, control their data online, and ever increasing AI and bot type environment, how do we, and Jordan, to your point of staying Bitcoin only, there's a lot of noise out there, whether it's in the crypto or with AI and investments being thrown out there. How do we widen the Bitcoin tent, keep growing the Bitcoin network as a whole from an individual perspective, and then also value pouring into the space?
I mean, there's a lot of business owners just in the Bitcoin space in general. So I would say get with John, and if you can, get set up to take Bitcoin as payment for your products or services. I think just that, that marketing of them getting an invoice and seeing that option to pay in Bitcoin, even if it's like planting that seed, right? And you don't know when it's going to come to fruition, but it might take a year, and they're like, hey, I got that monthly invoice and I keep seeing this thing, and I heard Bitcoin's doing well, or whatever's happening. Like, it opens up that conversation. And so I think that's an easy thing, because then it encourages people to pay you in Bitcoin. Of course, like we've heard, that's a way to add it to your balance sheet. But it just opens up conversations without you having to try to orange pill every single person in your life. And as a lot of us know, that's not the easiest thing in the world to do, right? So.
Awesome. Well, we just have a couple minutes left. Any questions from the group for the panelists up here? Yeah, Mark.
I do. I think with Lightning, at the inception of it, there's, just like with anything when it emerges, right? There's a lot of euphoria that comes with it. Lightning is an incredibly novel technology. Like, it's a very brilliant technology. Even if it fails, like, just the complexity to create something like that is it's astounding. And but everybody's like, okay, we've solved this last mile payment problem for people, and then they realize, like, okay, maybe this isn't. It's not growing that quickly. But we're taking a long-term approach with Lightning, so it's going to take us more time because we're not doing all the shitcoiny type things to incentivize people to adopt things in an unsustainable way. And then they're like, okay, well, it still has kind of really been going a long time, and maybe it's not great for the last mile part of payments, but it's good for like back end and like the new narrative of like being like a clearinghouse. And then the question's like, okay, so will it be ideal for back end settlement? I think it's good for back-end settlement. I think that there's going to be other substitute solutions that will probably be just as competitive. And I don't know if Lightning's network effect is large enough yet for that to be like a large enough moat for its adoption over time. But I do think that like this whole layered idea is just a huge experiment. And there's a lot of brilliant people who've had strong opinions about it over the years that have been completely wrong. And the idea is that we're witnessing what's happening right now. I think the problems with like Lightning from our perspective is that developers don't want to use it all the time in most cases because it's too challenging to create the user experience that they want within their applications. And that's because when you have distributed liquidity into channels, it's just like this fundamental problem. Like centralizing liquidity solves so many problems. So the question is like, how do we maintain the same trust nature with a more centralized solution for liquidity? That's kind of what Lightspark's doing. They're having a bit more of a trust trade-off where they're saying like, okay, we're going to centralize the liquidity, whereas like Lightning's a state channel, Lightspark is a state chain. And they're like centralized liquidity onto a chain that they maintain themselves, leveraging the Lightning network. And it changes the risk model so that, we can't steal your money, but we can censor it. And that's kind of more like the institutional grade developer friendly environment that, we have portfolio companies that tried something on Lightning and like, we're building it on Spark now and it's like way easier and it's doing exactly what we want. So that's an example. There's roll-ups, ARC, things like that. We think it's going to take a while for a lot of these things to really find a very strong form of product market fit to that. Like a lot of people think about these layer twos, and of course it's a very important question. But like what we think about, what are the largest pockets of liquidity that can start being converted into Bitcoin around the world? We wrote this massive banking report this year, basically saying like, banks don't care about Lightning, ARC, layer twos, any of that. That's like a decade, 2-decade type solution. They need a form of software that integrates with a core ledger and payment hub that they've been using for 30 years. And it's going to be, billions in IT costs for them to like try to switch out of that. So they need things that like are cooperate with the world that they exist in. And that's not really like this layer 2 stuff today. It's just kind of like brick and mortar fintech.
Yeah, the last question, then won't hold you guys too much more for before lunch.
Yeah. No, that's a great question. A lot of clients come to us in that specific situation. So we always, put together a very specific asset allocation investment strategy for each client. But for clients who maybe they are recent retirees, they aren't super familiar with holding their own keys. One of the unique things about Gannett Wealth Advisor, so other than ongoing financial planning, tax planning, as well as tax return filing, we have a CPA on staff. All of our clients are also Unchained Signature clients, which is essentially Unchained's white glove service. So you'd have a dedicated point of contact. You meet with quarterly review, disaster recovery, key control, operational best practice. So giving you that knowledge to make sure you feel comfortable holding your own keys.
Awesome. Yeah, well, thanks everyone for a great panel. If you want to experience the Lightning Network yourself, you can download the Sound HSA app, earn some sats for steps. Check your email. You should have a redeem code in there to connect to and type in your NPUB and boom, off to the races. And agreed, Eric, it's going to take some time for a lot of the infrastructure, bigger players to adopt. Bitcoin and Lightning and more of the solutions coming. But the beauty of Freedom Tech and Bitcoin is you don't need to ask permission, and we can start using some of these tools today and start learning in your next step of the journey. So appreciate everybody coming out and the panelists for discussion. Let's have some lunch.